on Julia.
This is all your fault, David Marks. Just for the recording, because I turned on the recording now. We've just had a little discussion before I started recording. Johnny Halpin asked me a question: how many wives was it normal to have in the time of King David? And I asked ChatGPT, who gave me a very good answer, which basically said, unless you were elite and very wealthy, you had one. Julia was very unhappy about the use of ChatGPT. It's taking over the world, and it's all David Marks' fault because he started me off on ChatGPT. I'd never got involved with it until David has given me what was it that you first looked at, David? It was the Abarbanel.
It was actually, don't blame me, blame Johnny Halpin, because it was his two questions that inspired me to get a quick answer. Right, if you remember, there was the Abarbanel, yes.
Abarbanel, that's right.
It was the explanation of why wives came before...
before horses.
Horses and wives. And then at the same time, Johnny had asked the question on kashrut.
Right, so there you go.
And I just used that for a bit of fun.
And just to be serious about it for a moment before we get into the Gemarah, Julia's point about it taking over, of course, is exactly the point about Amelim B'Torah. We spoke about it briefly, that the yeshivas don't like using art scrolls. We weren't allowed to use a jastro, although everybody had one underneath the desk. When I was first using the Steinsaltz Hebrew version, which was really only to help me because I was struggling with the Aramaic, that was frowned upon. And the reason is because, you're meant to break your teeth on this stuff and really get to understand it. And I can understand that. And I think this use of ChatGPT has really brought that to the fore. Yes, we'll take it on board, Julia. We'll get back to the Gemarah in real time. So just for, again...
So I'm going to take away my art scroll Gemarahs now.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the big boy Gemarah.
Big boy Gemarah. Okay. Well, I'm not good, not really. I'm not good enough for that because I have to give the shear, so I need help from the art scroll at least.
Well, what's wrong with the art scroll? I don't understand.
Okay, so the art scroll makes it too easy, according to the Magidei Shiur in Yeshiva. If you have the art scroll gives you the translation, but more importantly, it gives you the punctuation. And if you are just looking at the Gemarah itself in the Vilna Shas, you don't have any punctuation, you don't have any nekudot. It is much, much harder. And I'll be honest, even after many, many years of learning Gemarah, I am not so proficient as I might be at reading the Gemarah and understanding the Gemarah without the punctuation. And that is probably a feature and a function of the fact that I very early on started to use the Steinsaltz. And as I think I used the analogy of the bicycle with the stabilizers, I never took the stabilizers off for a very long time, and I am not as proficient at looking at the Gemarah without the punctuation and what have you as I might be. You could argue, and I do argue, and I think this is a fair argument, that actually you don't need that anymore because the Gemarah with the punctuation and with the translation is freely available. So that is an argument, and it's an argument to be had. There are pros and cons. My argument is that by banning, inverted commas, these aids, then what you do is you shut and close the Gemarah off to many, many thousands of people who otherwise wouldn't be able to learn it, and I think that's a great shame. There is an element, I mean, this is a bit cynical, but I think there is an element that of elitism, that actually some folk want it to remain elite and only available to those that can do it without that. I think that's sad if that is the case, but I think it exists.
I think this is progress, Johnny. The fact that GPT today is opening up doors that English translations of the Hebrew classics started to open 30, 40 years ago. And the fact that we now have groups of laymen, such as this group, your other shearing groups, who are benefiting from this, that this is one of the reasons why there's more learning going on in the Jewish communities worldwide than in any other point in Jewish history.
Agreed. Agreed.
There's also the point of you're always going to have your elite layer of people, whether it's artistic performers. You're always going to have your prima ballerina. You're always going to have your top. But this is making the Torah, in all its shapes and forms, available, as David said, to more people. And I would think that the idea of that is that more people should know. Also, I was in a shiur this morning where apparently the Rav Kook wrote about it in 1906, where he says that because they say that the generations are getting less and less and less, but he said he counters that with that on a personal basis we're less than the Tanaim, yeah, but on a population basis we're greater because we have available to us all the learning, and as a generation we're like dwarfs sitting on the shoulders of giants. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's a very nice way of putting it. I think that the greats of our generation are perhaps not as great as the greats of previous generations, but I think the Hamoin Am, the average person of our generation, is far, far more educated, far, far more knowledgeable, and has far more available than the average person of previous generations. So I agree entirely with all of that.
Well, then you're in good company, because also the Rav Kook, Avram Yitzhak Kook, said that in 1906, 100 years ago.
I'm delighted to be in the same company as Rav Kook. Yes, David.
Yeah. Can I just add to that, on a local basis, that I've been coming to these shiurim now since COVID. Okay, and again, it's another part of technology that has enabled more people to learn because of Zoom and things like Zoom. And I've noticed in the shiurim of yours that I attend, how much everyone's personal knowledge has increased. My own included, has increased substantially as a result of having these shiurim.
Great, thank you. Well, that's very encouraging for me. I'll just finish this conversation with one little story from yesterday, which gave me the most tremendous chizuk. I think I've probably said to you on a number of occasions that, Baruch Hashem, I don't have many regrets in my life, but one of my regrets is the paucity of education that I gave my children. It wasn't my fault, because we had no choice where I came from. There wasn't a choice of a great choice. Avril is nodding because she had the same choices, which were rubbish. But the education, the Jewish education that my children got, was poor, to say the least. And yesterday, my son Bobby, who is in Miluim, sent me a photograph from Har Gilboa, which is a mountain. Har Gilboa, everybody knows where it is. And he sent me a beautiful picture of a beautiful landscape there. And he said, I'm on Har Gilboa. Now, those of you who have learnt Shmuel with me, what happened on Har Gilboa?
Well, was killed.
Very good, Hannah. Very good, Hannah. You got Michael off the hook then, because I was about to ask Michael. Well done, Hannah. And Bobby wrote to me on WhatsApp, I'm on Har Gilboa where Saul topped himself. Okay, that's what he wrote. And I said, wow. I wrote back to him and said, what a beautiful picture. What a landscape. This is unbelievable. This is living Tanakh. And these people say that we have no right to be here. This is our living history. That's what I wrote to him. And he wrote back to me and said, where's it from? So I sent back to him Shmuel Aleph chapter 31. where we learnt it. I put it, I copied it out to him, and he said to me, he said, "Can you send me the shir?" He said, "Well," and then he phoned me. That's right. Then he phoned me. We started talking about it, and he said, "What comes after the Torah? What's the next book after the Torah?" I thought, what a disgrace that is, right? He didn't even know that Yehoshua was the first book after the Torah. And I said, it's Yehoshua. I said, if you're really interested, I started teaching Tanakh about 7 or 8 years ago, and we started at Yehoshua. And he said, send me the shir. Anyway, of course, this was pre-COVID, so they were audio shiurim, but I kept them all because I used to send them out to people who wanted them. So I sent him I found the first shir on Tanakh that we did all together back in July of 2018, I think it was, or 17, can't remember now. I found the shir and I started to listen to it before I sent it to him. And the shir begins with the following sentences. Most of us know the Chumash really well, but how many of us know what comes after the Chumash? Exactly what Bobby had said to me. Anyway, I sent him the first 2 shiurim. I sent him the first one, which was a Jewish history overview, and the first shir on Yehoshua. And he said, great, I'll listen to it later when I'm in a position to do so. And then I said back to him, I said, well, there are about 280 of them if you're interested, if you really like it. If you want to catch up, there's about 280 shiurim on Nach that we've done together. So that's 280 hours we've learned together on Nach. Now, that gave me such chizuk to know that my son, aged 35, who had a rubbish education, not learning a single word of Nach. He could learn Gemarah with you, but he couldn't learn Nach. Didn't even know that Yehoshua was the first book after the Torah. He's now at the age of 35 in the middle of Miluim. Why did all this come about? Because one of his comrades in Miluim is a tour guide and gave him all the rundown of where they were. And he's basically having a Tanakh shir whilst he's doing Miluim, actually in place. So it's, this is living in Israel. This is you can't explain this to people who have not experienced it. You just cannot. And it gave me a huge amount of pleasure to know that even if he doesn't listen to them, that he's had his peak. He's had his interest peaked, and I think if I know my son, he'll be asking you for more of those recordings as we go along. Anyway, let's get into the Gemarah because it's still time to be learning Gemarah. Okay. I'm going to put this Gemarah on the screen where I think we're up to. There we go. You should have it shortly. There we go. We were in the, as I say, for those on the recordings, I didn't say this before. I said this before the recording started. I was late getting off a meeting today, so I actually have not prepared this shiur like I normally do. So this shiur is on the hoof. We'll do it all together as we go along, rather than me having prepared it. So we're talking about the number of wives that David had. The idea was that the Mishnah said, if we go back up the page a little bit to the Mishnah said, Lo yarba lo nashim, a king should not increase the number of wives that he has. Ela shmona estra, he should only have 18. And then we had all our discussion and our homework, and I was massively impressed with your homework that you did to get to the fact that David was considered to be the paradigm king, the best king we could have. And the Tanakh tells us, Divrei Hayamim tells us that he had 6 wives at a certain point. And then we had the pasuk that said, Natan, the prophet, said when he was rebuking David on the Bathsheba business, he said, is it not enough that you have all your master's wives? And if that wasn't enough, I would give you kahena v'kahena. I would give you the same again and the same again. And the rabbis darshaned, the rabbis deduced from that David had, or could have had at least, 6 wives plus same again, 6 plus same again, 6, which was 18. And then we went on to say, no, it might be more, because 6, and then like that is 6, and then another vav and, so that's another 12, that's 24, and then another kahena, making 48. So we could darshan all sorts of ways. We could get to all sorts of numbers, all of which are a multiple of 6, starting with the 6 wives of David, whose names we know. I shall not ask you to name them all, but I'll ask you to name at least one. No, 2. You should be able to tell me at least 2 of the 6 that were listed.
Abigail.
Abigail, good.
And
Michal.
Michal is not listed
Egla.
as a
Egla
name
then.
Michal.
Egla
She's
then.
named Egla. Very good, Michael. Okay, those are the only 2 that I can remember off the top of my head as well. Although maybe Achinoam rings a bell. Maybe that was a father. Don't know.
No,
Anyway,
no, that was Achinoam was also.
that was also a wife. Okay, so we got 3 out of the 6 between us. Anyway, 6 it is. Now, this is where we left off last time. So we're on page 122 at the bottom. We are 2/3 of the way down on Chof Aleph Amud Aleph in the Big Boys Gemara, and it says, "V'hachtiv, is it not written?" This is a challenge. The Gemara is saying, "Hang on a minute. Are you sure that David only had this limited number of wives? V'hachtiv, is it not written? Vayikach David od pilagshim v'nashim b'Yerushalayim." And David took more concubines and wives in Yerushalayim, because remember, the 6 that were listed were where? Hebron, correct. And then our chapter 5 in Shmuel Bet, which we did just a few weeks ago. Remember, we've just finished chapter 6 in our Shmuel Bet Shiur. So Shmuel chapter 5 a few weeks ago told us that he took, by the time we went to Yerushalayim, bit of revision here. How long was he king in Hebron for?
7 years.
Very good, 7.5. But I'll give you 9.5 out of 10 for that. 7.5. And how many years in Yerushalayim?
3.
No,
How
more.
many, Hannah?
33.
33, correct. Okay, so whilst he was in Yerushalayim having 33 years of kingship, he took some more wives and concubines. We now know that he only did that because he was a king and he was elite and he was wealthy, because had he just been a poor average guy, he would only have had 1 wife, as we learned this morning. So the Gemara says, okay, lemalui shmona esra. Yes, he says that's correct. That's fine. He took more wives in Yerushalayim. He had 6 in Jerusalem, and therefore he took how many more?
12.
12 to make up the 18. So the Gemara says, yes, okay, that's fine. It's all consistent. What's your problem? Says the Gemara. And then the Gemara asks a different question. Hang on a minute. What do you mean he took concubines and wives? The Gemara says, "My nashim, umay pilagshim." What's the difference? What's a wife and what's a concubine? Now, don't tell me, because I won't believe you, don't tell me you haven't thought of this question yourself over the years when we've been learning about Hagar and Sarah and Rachel and Leah on the one hand, Bilhah and Zilpah on the other hand. Don't tell me that you have never considered the idea of what is a pilegesh. When we learnt about the pilegesh begiva, I think we even discussed it. What's the difference between a pilegesh, a concubine, and what is the difference between that and a wife? The Gemara is asking us.
Monetary implications.
Okay, Johnny.
A pelegish is a partner in today's terminology, and a wife is somebody you make a commitment to.
Okay, let me stop you there. That Julia's not happy with that. Come on, Julia, don't do my work. Go on, do my work for me on this one.
I can't unmute.
You were unmuted. We can hear you.
Oh,
We can hear you.
fine. Well, just that people commit without a marriage contract nowadays, even though, as far as religion is concerned, that's not the correct way to do it. It is a known fact that people do commit.
It's not a question of religion. It's a question of legality. A ketubah is a legal contract.
Okay, so
being somebody's partner
No,
is
because
not.
No, that's not true either. I mean, you can have common law marriages. You can also have civil marriages, and common law marriages in England, there is no commitment. You've been living together for a long time without a marriage contract, and you still have entitlements.
So I think the difference there, Hannah, the first thing that you said in your statement was correct, and that is that a pilegesh is without a contract, without a marriage contract. The second thing that you said, which is without commitment, I think people who are partners and not married would probably take issue with the fact that they're not committed. But I know what you meant, and you're right, because the Gemarah tells us, look at the Gemarah. Amar Rav. Rav tells us, Nashim biktuva ubekidushin. A wife is with a ketubah and with kiddushin. What is kiddushin?
Sanctification of the marriage.
Okay, that's true, because it comes from the word kadosh. In practice, what is kiddushin? What is the bracha that we say under the chuppah?
Masader kedushin.
Okay, the one who is masader kedushin, which means who arranges the kiddushin. What is the bracha? The bracha is, blessed are you Hashem, who has forbidden the forbidden marriages, and who has allowed the marriages that are allowed. Al yidei chuppah v'kiddushin, by a chuppah and kiddushin. Kiddushin is betrothal. What we do at a wedding today is two things. We do kiddushin, and we do, what's the other thing we do? What's the other word we do?
Yichud.
Yichud.
Good. Very good, Hannah. We do yichud afterwards, Johnny.
Yeah.
Kiddushin ve'erusin.
Erusin.
Kiddushin is betrothal. In the olden days, you did a kiddushin, and then what happened, Michael Kraus?
You stay with your parents until the marriage.
Correct. You go off back to your parents' home for up to a year, and then you had the erusin, which is the marriage ceremony. Why do we combine them today, Michael?
Worried that things won't work out, and therefore with a year's space in between them, the marriage might not take place, and that will cause the individual's problems later on about having kids and everything else.
You're quite right, because if you have kiddushin, by that time you are almost married, and you need a sort of get. So if the marriage was to not go ahead after kiddushin, it's complicated. You need a sort of a get, and you are sort of tainted as a sort of divorced woman. Bad news to be a kiddushin that breaks off.
Was one
sorry. One sec, Julia. Let me just finish the circle, and then I'll come to you. In certain Hasidic circles today, they still do a kiddushin, where they do a proper contract at kiddushin, and then an erusin they do later on. We don't do that. The vast majority of Jews today don't do that. What we do is a vault, which means a Yiddish word for
a word.
A word. So you a vault, a word. So when you do this ceremony of there, it is the parents of the bride and groom, or potential bride and groom, who are giving their word that they will do everything they can to bring this marriage to fruition. But it is not a betrothal. It is not an engagement in the terms of a kiddushin. The kiddushin is the first part of the chuppah, before the reading of the ketubah. So when you are Masada Kiddushin, what you do is you say the bracha of the Kiddushin, you give the Brei Pri Hagafen, you give the wine to the thing, and that is the Kiddushin. Then you read the ketubah. Why do you read the ketubah? For one reason only, and that is to separate the two procedures of Kiddushin and Erusin. And then you do the Erusin, which is the giving of the ring and the Sheva Brachot. Yeah. So the Kiddushin is betrothal. So Ketubah is the Erusin, and Kiddushin is the betrothal. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, here back into our Gemarah. Oh yes, sorry, Julia, you wanted to say.
I was just going to say, I wonder if there was a lengthy period in those days because of the age of the betrothed people, that people would be betrothed at a very young age and give them time to mature a bit more.
Yes, very, very correct. That is exactly what happened in many cases. That they would be betrothed. They'd make the shidduch, aged 8, 9, 10, whatever. 3, if you believe the Midrash, which I don't. And that's what David Marks was thinking there. I can read his mind. Correct, David?
Absolutely. Well, the Midrash is worried by the chronology as it appears in the Torah. And the chronology as it's found in books like Seder Olam.
Yeah. So yes, they did make shidduchim early, and the kiddushin period would be there until it was appropriate to have the erusin and the consummation of the marriage. Correct, Julia. Right. So according to Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, a wife has a ketubah and a kiddushin. Pilagshim b'lo ketubah ub'lo kiddushin. Exactly as Hannah said, there's no contract. Let's have a look over here at the Steinsaltz. Ketubah, a marriage contract, is a legal document given by a husband to his wife upon their marriage, stating his obligations to her during and after the marriage. The contract includes a lien on the husband's estate for money payable if she's divorced or widowed, the minimum amount being 200 dinars for a virgin bride and 100 dinars for other brides. While the general guidelines for marriage contract present in the Talmud, the particular provisions are often based on local custom, blah, blah, da, 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 da. Okay. The marriage contract gives the marriage halachic legitimacy. Without one, the couple's relationship is considered licentious. Okay. So that's the background there. And there's a halachic thing here. Listen, look at this. This is very interesting. And I'm going to tell you a modern story about a pilegesh. Let's have a look at the halacha here on the left-hand side. Isha upilegesh, the king may take wives and concubines, wives with betrothal and a marriage contract, and concubines without betrothal or a marriage contract. It is permitted for only kings, not ordinary people, to take concubines.
But we had the Pilegesh, who was not married to a king.
Correct. Okay, let's carry on and we'll come back to that. Some early authorities rule that a concubine is betrothed but does not receive a marriage contract. Moreover, some of them rule that it is permitted for even an ordinary person to take a concubine who is designated permanently and exclusively for him, which means that the Pilegesh Begiva story makes sense, because what happened to the Pilegesh Begiva was that this Pilegesh ran off back to her father, and we'll call him a husband because I can't think of another word for him. The partner, the Pilegesh other side, the spouse, whatever you want to call him, went back looking for her because he was, as my mother used to say, banking for her. You know that Yiddish word, Johnny? Banking, banking with an N, banking. It means to be pining for. So he was banking for this Pilegesh. He went back, and of course he was mortified when this Pilegesh was raped, because presumably she was a Pilegesh who had been, as is written here, designated permanently and exclusively for him. So that Pilegesh Begiva, Julia, fits in with the second half of that little statement about
He didn't
halacha.
do much to protect her.
No, he didn't.
Well, I'm not
Threw her
sure
to the wolves.
did he throw it to the wolves, or did
Yes.
it? Was it
Yeah,
him
he
that threw
did.
it?
Yes, of course he
Wait.
did.
Was it him that threw it to the wolves, or was it
Well, he
his
didn't do
host?
anything to stop it,
Or was it his
because they
host
wanted
that-
him. The men wanted him, and he said, "No, take her instead."
Yeah, well, yeah.
There's no way
Point
out of
taken,
that.
but you also have to say that his host was the prime mover in that. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with you on it. So
It's not much of a commitment.
no, that's true. It's true. Anyway, so that's a Pilegesh. So according to some, the Rambam in Sefer Shoftim, by the looks of it, and Hilchot Melachim Umilcham Teichem. By the way, if you're interested, on the days that Rav Yuval is not at Mincha and Mariv, and I am learning Sefer Hilchot Melachim Umilcham Tam with the folk. We have a little share in between Mincha and Mariv, and when Rav Yuval's there, he does it, and when he's not there and I'm there, I do it, and that's what we're learning. We're not at chapter 4 yet, but we will get there, so it'll be interesting when we get there to go through this in some detail. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a little story about a Pilegesh, or not, as the case may be. As some of you may know, my wife is a psychotherapist. One of the things that she had the dubious honour of doing when she was working in Manchester was to be the go-to psychotherapist for sexual abuse and psychosexual problems in the Manchester Orthodox community, of which there are many, unfortunately. Anyway, one of such case came to her where a husband and wife were having some difficulties in that department, largely because the wife only went to the mikveh once a year in order to get pregnant. And after she'd got pregnant, that was it. She never went back to the mikveh. And so obviously she can't go to the mikveh. There can't be any relations. So basically...
while she's pregnant, does she need to go to the mikveh?
She doesn't need to go to the mikveh if she's not bleeding. No, that's true. But she would make sure that she was not available to her husband. Let's put it that way. Okay. I used an expression the other day in a shiur which caused somebody who told me that he'd been listening to it to fall off his chair. I used an expression in this regard: "Shut up shop." I can't remember the context in which I used it, but it caused one of our community who's a little not used to these kind of things to fall off his chair. But I'm going to use that expression again. So this lady shut up shop, and obviously that was difficult, made the marriage rather difficult, and it made its way through to my wife for counselling. And this chap had the perfect solution, which was he wanted to take a Pilegesh. And he said, well, look, this was a very orthodox guy who knew the halacha, and said, look, it's permitted for men to take a Pilegesh.
A Jewish Pilegesh.
Well, it says it's licensed.
A Jewish Pilegesh or any Pilegesh.
He didn't specify. I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously. I can't remember. I don't think he specified at this point. Okay. He wanted to take a Pilegesh. Basically, he wanted to take somebody that he would use for sexual purposes while still married to his wife.
An affair.
Okay, he wanted to have somebody available.
He wanted somebody to approve it.
And he wanted, he asked, my wife what she thought about this idea. And my wife said, well, look, first of all, I think you need to go and find out, before I give you any psychological advice on this or psychotherapeutic input on this, shouldn't you be discussing this with your rabbi? And so off he went to the rabbi to discuss the idea of whether it was halachically acceptable in today's day and age to have a pilegesh. What do you think the rabbi's response was?
Negative.
Acceptable to go to a prostitute.
Okay, that wasn't the question. That's a different question. Julia says negative.
It depends.
I would go with it depends.
Okay, that's always the best answer to give when you ask what that answer was from a rabbi.
I would have said no.
That is always the answer. Is it depends. You're on a safe bet there. Julia says no. Johnny says no. Michael and Hannah says it depends. David, are you going to?
Okay, I'll qualify that. I would lean towards yes.
Okay, Hannah would lean towards yes.
Halachically, I would lean towards yes.
Okay, David? Well,
I assume being a Haredi rabbi in Manchester, he wouldn't turn to ChatGPT.
Well, probably not. Okay, I assume from that you're not willing to give an opinion.
No idea.
Avril, you want to tell us? No idea. Okay, well, I'll tell you what he said. It depends. Okay, it depends. And what does it depend on? Well, the first thing it depended it on was whether the wife approved. Okay, the first thing he had to do before it even got to a discussion about how and what and where and who and when was to get his wife's approval. And if his wife's approval was given, then there would be various questions about the contract and how it would work and what his commitment, to use Hannah's word, would be to this pilegesh. The overall answer was a very usual and good answer that is very commonly given, certainly in Manchester, said beautifully in Yiddish, besser nicht. Best not. Okay, but on a purely halachic discussion, taking out aside that this actually was a real question, believe it or not, there seems to be a position to say that if the wife would agree, and it may have been that this wife would have been quite happy for that. I mean, as long as she didn't have to do it, she might have been quite happy for somebody else to take on the role. Don't know. But if the wife agreed, there was at least a position for discussion. I don't think the halachic discussion ever got beyond that point, because I don't think the wife did agree. And I don't think I have to ask my wife the details. I can't remember now. But I don't think it ever got beyond that point. But what's interesting to me was that the answer wasn't, don't be ridiculous, right? The answer was, it depends. If your wife agrees, there might be a position to say that. So it was very interesting. So that was my little modern story about a pilegesh. And what was interesting was that this chap used the word pilegesh. That was the word that he used, and he understood, because I mean, this guy was, very Haredi guy, was not somebody who was, knowledgeable about the world, if you like, but was very knowledgeable about the Torah and understood the concept of a pilegesh from his learning. And so what was interesting was that he used this word pilegesh, which of course he's known about from this Gemarah and from other sources in the Torah. I thought it was very interesting, an interesting thing. So that's where we're up to at the moment. Let's carry on. Where are we going to?
He would also, sorry, Julia.
One at a time. Julia first, and then David.
Well, I'm just reading what Rav Steinsaltz says, and he said that it might have been permissible for an ordinary person to take a concubine who is designated permanently and exclusively for him. It would be very difficult for somebody to find somebody nowadays that would do that without a marriage contract. So although it might depend, feasibly, I would have thought it would be incredibly difficult to meet the requirements.
Yes, I take that on board. However, let me paint you a picture. let's assume, I don't think this was the case, but let's assume this guy was a multi-billionaire.
You say he was a footballer, Johnny. Sorry.
Right. Let's say he was a multi-billionaire. This chap who wants a pilegesh, and he finds a pilegesh and says, "I give you £1 million a year to be permanently and exclusively designated for me. I'm not marrying you, but I'll give you £1 million a year to do it." Don't think it would be that difficult to find, do you?
I suppose not. But then I'm going back to Rav Yehuda says that wives receive a marriage contract and betrothal. Concubines are taken without a marriage contract, without betrothal, and it therefore says without one, the couple's relationship is considered licentious. I don't understand how a religious man could nowadays take that approach.
Okay, well, it's a fair question, and I'll tell you why. And I think it's a reasonable approach for him
What
to
does
take.
licentious mean? Excuse me, I'm not sure.
Licentious means
just physical,
perverse,
immoral.
and immoral.
Okay.
That's one individual's viewpoint, though, isn't it? It's not everybody's viewpoint.
Yeah, and I think the answer to Julia's question is that, Michael, that and this is a very common thing certainly in Haredi circles, and it's reasonable, and that is this: their entire thought process is based on the Torah and the Talmud. That is their entire
Frame of reference.
Frame of reference, exactly. That's very good. Thank you. I was struggling for the words. That is their entire frame of reference. They don't have. He's not looking at this as licentious. He's not looking at this as immoral. He's looking at this as this is a physical need which is not being provided. Is there a Talmudic and halachic way of sorting this out?
Without divorce.
Without divorce. Yes, without divorce. Yes. So listen, this is how it works in those circles. They don't have another frame of reference, right? I'll give you another example, right? You'll be aware that there are in people who are of premenopausal age and who are married, there is the concept of nida, okay, where a woman is ritually impure and is not able to have relations with her husband. And there are clear signs when a woman is nida, when she's having menstruation, etc. And there are rules as to when that period of nida finishes. And there can be, like everything else, machloket as to whether she is or she isn't. And you have to ask questions of a competent halachic authority. And that sometimes involves taking stained underwear to the rabbi. Now, at first glance, for people like you and me who are living in the modern 21st century, that's a horrendous thought that a man, and it has to be the man, the woman wouldn't do it, a man takes his wife's stained underwear for the rabbi to examine. I mean, you think about it outside of the parameters of Jewish law, it's ridiculous. It's an absurdity. But that's your frame of reference. If that's your frame of reference, they don't see it as embarrassing. The man doesn't see it as embarrassing. The woman doesn't see it as embarrassing, and the rabbi doesn't see it as embarrassing because they don't have that frame of reference.
Johnny, before I lived here, I was living in a Dati Leumi community in another part of Israel. It was definitely Dati Leumi, not Haredi at all. The rabbi there was a young rabbi who was Miluimnik as well, so obviously also Dati Leumi. He had a box outside of his home for ladies to deposit such things for him to do a badika.
Yeah, which if you were to go...
I was shocked in that type of community.
You were shocked. Go and tell that to a totally secular Jew or a non-Jew, and they'd say that's kinky, that's weird, that's something wrong with that, right? Because there's a different frame of reference. But for us, I mean, I have to say, you know, thank God nobody ever brings me neither shilas, because you know, my community are largely beyond that. But please don't. But you know, when on the odd occasion when I had to do it, I found it uncomfortable because my frame of reference is not, you know, totally in that world. So, but for those people who are in that frame of reference, it's not something, you know, uncomfortable. And it's the same with this Pilegesh business. Their frame of reference is not that it's licentious or immoral. So I can certainly see why this guy came up with this suggestion. We all thought it was odd, but we don't have their frame of reference, and I get it. Yes, Hannah.
Somewhere in the middle in this whole discussion, but the thought just came into my head that it's okay. People feel uncomfortable with this practice of taking the underwear to the rabbi to decide whether it's blood or whether it's not. However, I feel uncomfortable in watching on TV a gay parade where people are running around 3/4 naked, or walking down the street and they're more undressed than they're dressed, and nobody seems to think that there's anything wrong with that. Different people, like you said, according to frame of reference, find different things uncomfortable, licentious, or whatever. And we live in a society where it's okay to run around half naked, but it's not okay to get in inverted commas, professional opinion on whether a piece of material's got blood on it or it hasn't got blood on it.
No, you're not comparing light with light.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a matter of choice. You don't.
Yeah, I don't think.
I didn't hear what Julia said. I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
I just said that you don't need to be watching on TV. You can turn it off. But this is a halakhic rule, so it's not.
Yeah, but you don't have to.
You're comparing similar things.
I don't think anybody except the husband and the rabbi see this piece of material. It's not a question if I have to watch it or I don't have to watch it. Nobody sees it except the husband or the wife, the husband, and the rabbi. So it's more in your face when people run around half naked in the street.
Yeah, but apart from Johnny saying it made him feel uncomfortable, none of us has criticized. Well, also David said he thought it was strange, but I would think that it was an acceptable part of the way that people lived. But that if you're in that community, you accept it. But
agreed, and of course, I wasn't criticizing at all, because of course I did the same thing, because I am in that same frame of reference. However, what I was pointing out was that somebody, but even though I'm in that frame of reference, I'm also in the frame of reference of modern society, and therefore, and same as David, and therefore we felt a bit uncomfortable with it. What I was pointing out, and it was not a criticism, and I made it very clear that it was not a criticism, is that those people who live entirely in that frame of reference would not have any qualms about it whatsoever. Yeah. And I said very clearly that I understand that, I accept that, and I was by no means criticizing it at all. So if it came over as a criticism, then that was not intended.
It came over as something to be disparaged. Yeah, well, not to be criticized, but to be. Yeah, it's like the Chiloni Israelis would call it primitive. Yeah, well, I don't think so.
I would take objection to that. I think if you took it as disparaging, that's your problem, because it was not in any way put over in a disparaging way. I think I was extremely careful not to put it over in a disparaging way. And it was not meant to be disparaging, and it wasn't disparaging. And I think you've got a bit of an issue with me because you think that I'm Haredi bashing when I'm not. So no. I think we'll move on. Let's move on in the Gemara.
I wanted to say something else. I wanted to say that, as far as I understand, when a man is legally, halachically capable, allowed to divorce a wife for shutting up shop, number one. And number two is, at least with unmarried men, if the need is so strong, they're allowed to go to prostitutes, which would open the door for somebody like this gentleman to, yes, have somebody there on the side, halachically.
Okay,
And
I'm
no,
not sure.
I don't think you had. I've got to clear this up. I don't think you Haredi bashed. I said it was. I didn't know where I stand in this whole issue. It wasn't. I wasn't directing it about you. I was directing it about me. I'm not quite sure, you know, how I react to it. Okay, you don't.
Okay.
In my opinion, you don't Haredi bash. Okay,
good. Glad we've cleared that up. Right. Let me just challenge you on one point there. I'm not sure that a man can divorce his wife for shutting up shop. A woman.
I think Hannah's correct, Johnny.
A woman can because it's in the Torah. A woman can divorce a man if he shuts up shop because he has an obligation in his kesuba. He has an obligation. It's an obligation in the Torah to provide three things: Oinah, Ksuta, what's the third one? David, help me out here.
Yeah, Mishpatim. Beginning of Mishpat.
Yeah, he has to give conjugal rights.
She'era,
Ksuta, and Ona'ah. He has to give clothing, he has to give food, and he has to give conjugal rights. That's a halachic obligation, midoraita, for the man to give conjugal rights to the woman. There is
I think midrabanan it works as well.
Okay. Let me finish. Midoraita, there is no converse midoraita halacha that a woman has to give a man conjugal rights. Midorabanan, different story.
I'm not sure, Johnny, because he still has to fulfill the mitzvah of peruvu, and if his wife isn't giving him permission,
what if she's infertile? She's had a hysterectomy.
That's something different. Or what Rahman al-Islam, if when they were first married, she was perfectly healthy, and now for reasons of health, she's unable to fulfill her obligation. And there are modern halachic issues that I think are discussed about the circumstances where a husband is allowed to enter into a relationship in the same way as that there are modern halachic discussions about the couple that can't wait. Should she still go to the mikveh?
Yeah. So these are all very b'diavad situations, aren't they?
Yeah.
But let's just stick with the halachic thing that we just started with. And we won't ask ChatGPT, but I will go and look it up. And I will also put this question out on my rabbinic doctor group, which is a fabulous WhatsApp group because it comes up with all sorts of mad questions and even madder answers. But I am not sure. I don't know, but I'm not sure whether a woman refusing conjugal relations is grounds for a divorce. It sounds like it should be, and it may well be midrabanan. It's certainly not a deoraita because the deoraita is only on the male. As to the use of prostitutes, that is certainly a solution which is, if not officially, then unofficially sanctioned in these situations. And I've seen it with my own, not seen the thing, but heard the psak with my own ears. But you know, it's one of those.
It's all come out of modern issues that you have
Yeah.
surrogates today, not just for infertile couples, but where one person in a relationship, for whatever reason, is no longer prepared to grant conjugal rights to the partner.
Yeah. So these are very, very complicated issues, and we've opened up a can of worms here with my Pilegesh story, and we're out of time.
I think Shlomo Brody, who came to your community recently, is one of the modern experts on these kinds of subjects.
He is. I'm on a group with him. I'm going to ask him what his opinion is. I'm also going to ask Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, who is my Rebbe in these matters. So I'll get back to you on that point. But I just want to say one thing. I'm really glad that I didn't waste my time preparing a shiur today, because we wouldn't have done any of it. Whatever I would have prepared, we wouldn't have got to it. So I thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Very enjoyable.
Out of sync. Please God, we'll go back next Wednesday to something more like normality. Hopefully the world will be a little bit more normal by then. Let me just check what's going on next week. Yeah, next week does not look like it should be any difficulty with us learning in the normal time. So should I put a health warning on the recording of the shiur? That's the question. I think I probably should.
It should be X-rated, actually.
X-rated, yeah.
After the reaction about the person in the community that you mentioned before, I think you ought to.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is when I put these recordings on, I don't know if you've ever put a recording on YouTube. When you put a recording on YouTube, one of the questions it asks you, you have to tick yes or no. Is this made for children? So I think I definitely have to tick no for this one.
Please record the next couple of weeks.